Hey everybody, so glad you're tuning in today. My name is Matt O'Connell. This is Spoken Truth Revolution. Really glad you're all tuning in, engaging on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe as well to YouTube. I release my podcast. I try to release it every Monday, and hopefully I'll get it out in time for today as well. So a couple stories. First one I want to talk about is Governor Kathy Hochul. She's the new New York governor. And I'll just cut to the chase here. First thing I want to show is you may recall this Times Magazine cover. And this is in reference to when, of course, as you know, 2020, COVID-19, pandemic, so on and so forth. I think you heard about that perhaps. But Time, it says, Guardian of the Year, Frontline Health Workers. Well, they're updating their cover. And as you can see here, and they are just referring to guardians of the year who have been vaccinated, right? So this is a big, big story. And there is a point to this particular image that you're seeing now. But we see in this New York Post article, Northwell Health first to fire hospital staff who refuse vaccinations. Before I start diving into this particular story, if you need any further evidence to prove that this pandemic is officially over from a governmental policy-making standpoint, look no further than to the Democratic states and how they're governing their citizens, and especially moves like this. If the pandemic was in its height where we wanted to really make sure that the cases were down, the hospitalizations were down, so on and so forth, do you think that they would be firing hospital workers? Hospital workers, mind you, that have been on the front lines in the hospitals helping and caring for folks who have COVID-19 and are likely exposed to COVID-19. They likely have, if they're surviving today, they likely have built up antibodies and are immune because their immune system has now functioned. And if they now say, I don't want the vaccine, we're going to fire those people? Like, the logic is not there. The logic, again, poof, it disappears. It has evaporated in midair. But needless to say, let's get into this article because it goes into a little bit of detail of what's happening in New York and the mandate of all health professionals need to get vaccinated. So it says this. It's D-Day for mandates. New York's largest hospital system, Northwell Health, began sacking staff who refused to get their coronavirus shots, as Governor Kathy Hochul refused to yield on her Monday deadline for health worker inoculations. Hochul stuck to her guns as many of the state's major hospitals and government employee unions continued their court battle to get the mandate tossed. She said, I've made it loud and clear that I'm not going to change my position, Hochul said during a Monday morning press conference. I'm charged with protecting the health of all New Yorkers. And I'm not going to get into all the details of the statistics, but it's around a 99.45% survival rate for all ages to survive COVID if they get it. That includes 0 to 100 years old, comorbidities, elderly, so on and so forth. You can look at the data in the CDC. The number may be even higher since the last time I read it off as well. So she continues on, we're taking all the steps preemptively in anticipation of what I called a preventable staffing shortage, Hochul said. Still preventable, enough hours in a day, come on down to get your shots. So essentially what's happening in New York is that they are, with Hochul's mandate, and I think it was actually instituted with Cuomo as well, but since Cuomo is no longer the governor, not because he basically killed off a lot of the elderly folks and had tremendous, terrible COVID policies where he was putting elderly folks in nursing homes who had COVID, and it was spreading like wildfire and killing off a lot of elderly folks in the nursing homes. But needless to say, she is basically executing on that former Cuomo mandate and in relation to the vaccine mandate for health professionals. So she continues on and it talks about how there's about 5,000 people, 5,000 staff, health professionals within this, the biggest health system in New York, Northwell Health, that are going to likely get not laid off, but fired if they do not get the vaccine. And then she continues on where there's a religious freedom lawsuit filed by 17 health workers, the majority being Catholic, against Hochul, the Department of Health, and the Attorney General Letitia James. And then Hochul argues that the state constitution does not allow for religious exemptions. Utica Judge David Hurd has until October 12th to make a final decision. So, interestingly enough, Hochul makes the claim in this next video that I'll show in just a minute that the vaccine in itself is a religious act. So take a listen to this.
God did answer our prayers. He made the smartest men and women, the scientists, the doctors, the researchers. He made them come up with a vaccine that is from God to us. And we must say, thank you, God. Thank you. And I wear my vaccinated necklace all the time to say, I'm vaccinated. All of you. Yes, I know you're vaccinated. You're the smart ones, but you know there's people out there who aren't listening to God and what God wants. You know this. You know who they are. I need you to be my apostles. I need you to go out and talk about it and say, we owe this to each other. We love each other.
So, couple things. Number one, she says, I wear my vaccinated necklace. Like, I don't even know where do I begin? Where do I begin with this? So she has a necklace saying, I'm vaccinated. And that, it's almost, it's just really, really weird. It's as if you would get like a tattoo that I'm vaccinated. But like, I don't understand that. This has now become a belief system because these folks clearly don't look at the data. I look at the data and I can go out without any fear. I have a higher chance of getting in a car accident today than actually catching COVID and dying from COVID. So knowing as I evaluate the risk in my mind, I know that if I'm not usually afraid at all, taking a ride to pick up groceries, or bringing my kids to school or going to church on Sunday. And so if COVID is a lesser risk than getting in a car accident today, than dying from COVID today, why would I be so afraid of COVID? And so that's how my mind processes it. You may process it differently. But again, we need to really, look at this in context of what we're dealing with here. She also says this, there are those people who are out there that aren't listening to God. Now, I wonder with her statement here, I wonder if she is now making this into a religious argument. Seems like she is, because she's attending a service at what's called the Christian Cultural Center in Brooklyn. And so she says, though, there are those people who are out there that aren't listening to God. So I can say, well, I don't believe in that religion. It's not my God. I don't believe in the vaccine God or the COVID God. And so therefore, I don't agree with that religious belief. Therefore, I will not take the vaccine. I know the data. I look at the data. The CDC provides it to everyone publicly. And I have a 99.99985% chance of surviving COVID based on my demographic, my health, no comorbidities, so on and so forth. So you need to evaluate, as you're watching this, you need to evaluate your own risk as well and determine if you want to get the vaccine or not. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm pro-choice as it relates to being, pro-medical freedom is a better word. Pro-choice is more for the abortion argument. I'm not pro-choice from the abortion standpoint. I am pro-medical freedom. So if you are evaluating your risk and processing that in your mind and you're like, I don't need the vaccine, then that's your choice, okay? But she's now making this into like a religion, which is weird. And then she says, I need you to be my apostles and talk about it. It's like, where are you going with this? I don't even, this is why people don't agree and often question what's going on with the elites, the Democrats, the left, and their great push for the COVID vaccine. And so here's, as we're talking about the vaccine, we see this other, I don't even know where to start with this. This is Stephen Colbert. And I often compare Stephen Colbert with Rachel Maddow from MSNBC because I feel like they look so much alike. It's like they're turning into each other almost, but that's just kind of a side point. So I'm joking, okay? Will you just relax? Will you just like take the joke and laugh? But this is why people, like if the left wanted to and the Democrats wanted to convince people to take the vaccine, maybe a video like this would convince you. Roll the tape. Like, I don't even know where to begin with this. Like, what the heck is wrong with people? Seriously. Like, and they're saying that, oh, you anti-vaxxer, you're like in a cult. It's like, are you kidding me? Can you guys just like look at what y'all have said and done and the dance moves and the costumes that you've worn? Like, you're saying that we're in a cult? Like, are we in the Twilight Zone right now? Who in the world is convinced more to get the vaccine after watching that tape? Are you convinced more are you like more convinced to take the vaccine after watching that? I'm not. I mean, I'm just more or less creeped out, to be quite frank. But and the other thing is we have in Massachusetts, there's NPR reports dozens of Massachusetts state police have resigned over a vaccine mandate, the union says. And so it says this, dozens of Massachusetts state troopers have put in their resignation papers following the state's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The State Police Association of Massachusetts said, under Governor Charlie Baker, executive order issued last month, all executive departments employees are required to show proof of vaccination on or before October 17th, or they'll be fired. It is unfortunate that the governor and his team have chosen to mandate one of the most stringent vaccine mandates in the country with no reasonable alternatives, like testing every week and, swabs or whatever. Last week, a state judge denied a request from the state police union to block the governor's vaccine mandate for troopers, according to WBZ-TV. The police union attorney told the local broadcasters that up to 20% of the state police employees remain unvaccinated. With the judge's ruling, unvaccinated troopers were only given a few days to get their first vaccine dose, or they could face disciplinary action, WBZ reported. So Governor Baker is a Republican. Super air quotes for this. The guy runs he's a Democrat, 100%. Like, he's not even remotely close to being Republican. And I find this interesting because, like the healthcare workers, I mean, the police, I thank you. If you've served and you're a police officer, thank you so much for serving. I honor you. And I can't imagine being a police officer during the state of not just COVID, but just everything going on in our society with not being respected, the ideologies of systematic racism floating around and how cops are racist and the left pushing a lot of propaganda saying that police are gunning down black men. But that's a whole nother thing, whole nother topic I've talked about before, but won't do it right now. But in short, like if they're going to be firing just nonchalantly police officers, like we've seen in Afghanistan, something fills that void, right? So who will be replacing the police officers? It's likely if the officers are still there, perhaps there are some officers, they're just getting the vaccine to keep their job. There may be officers that are really left pushing and they believed in leftist ideologies, and they are likely to enforce leftist law, right? I think what's special about the United States, unlike Australia, is, we have a really decentralized law enforcement entities, FBI's, federal, and then you have your state troopers, your local city, county, sheriff departments, things like that. But it's likely if you're not vaccinated, it's a high possibility that you are right leaning, you're conservative, because conservatives tend to not trust the media. Media is really pushing the vaccines, not to say the vaccines are terrible or anything like that. But again, it's all about choice. But needless to say, but who is going to fill these roles? Who is going to fill these roles? That's the big question. And you have to wonder, like, if there's, what Hochul did in New York, she's even calling the National Guard to come help and fill in. Would the National Guard come and start, taking up orders to be law enforcers? The National Guard, the military force? Like, think about that. I wonder if this is the big game around, quote unquote, defunding the police. It's not necessarily the Democrats' way of actually transitioning monetary funds from the police departments into other social programs that they want to do. But what if defunding the police is demoralize the police and then institute policies such as a vaccine mandate that removes the police in a way that, quote unquote, defunds them, that weakens them? And so who will fill in the gap? Who will fill in those vacuums? Because that's something that we should continue to monitor. All right, in other news from the National Review, school board group asked Biden to review whether parent confrontations over CRT constitute domestic terrorism. Can't wait to dive into this one. It says this: in a letter to the White House, a group that represents school boards urged the Biden administration to consider whether confrontations by outraged parents over COVID restrictions and critical race theory being incorporated into the class curriculum violate the Patriot Act. The letter contended that the quote-unquote, the classification of these heinous actions could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. It continues on, the school board group's escalation of the conflict to the federal level signals that many parents' qualms with their tax dollars potentially funding indoctrination or a radicalized education are being dismissed as illegitimate by administrators. In Loudoun County, Virginia, which became ground zero for school board fights last year, an anti-CRT organization launched $500,000 worth of ads slamming the local school board for attempting to shut down the parent resistance to the district's equity and inclusion initiatives. Similarly, in Guilford, Connecticut, and other typically Democratic-dominated suburban towns across America, grassroots parents are building movements to oust their progressive school boards that have been spearheading or rubber stamping new politicized curriculum changes. During a press conference Thursday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki indicated that the administration is attempting, or I should say investigating, whether it can get involved to protect the school boards allegedly receiving these verbal assaults. She says this: we're continuing to explore if more can be done from across the administration, she said. Obviously, these threats to school board members is horrible. They're doing their jobs. Echoing Psaki at a U.S. Senate committee hearing Thursday, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona slammed the antagonism against school board administrators, applauding the school boards for their commitment to safe school reopening. He expressed concern with the level of animus and aggression exhibited at some school board meetings, calling it very dangerous. Where do I begin with this article? Because the parents are responsible for their children. The parents are also the taxpayers that provide the salary if the school board members actually get a salary, but certainly the administrators. Public school is funded by the taxpayers. So it's the parents who are in charge. And if they have a say in what is taught to their children, the school board members better hear them out. And if there is any threats of violence, I am not for that. I think freedom of speech is critical. But what we're seeing here is we're seeing school boards, we're seeing the Biden administration, and we're seeing the education secretary trying to squash freedom of speech. And I applaud all these parents who are doing the right thing. If those parents are doing the wrong thing and they're actually threatening school board members, I am not for that. I'm not for that. But I haven't seen any evidence that has come out against those physical threats and altercations. If they have come out, I am against those. But parents are becoming more aware of truly the indoctrination of the public school systems, and specifically around critical race theory which, yes, critical race theory, though in the actual curriculum, critical race theory isn't being taught. And I've talked about this a few times in my prior podcast episodes. But yeah, they may not necessarily be teaching and opening a book called Critical Race Theory. Open up to chapter 1. No, it's not called that. What it's called is systematic racism. That's part of critical race theory. White privilege, those terms called critical race theory. Or white supremacist culture, critical race theory. Or white supremacist institutions, those are critical race theories. Those are all tenets and those are all fundamental principles that have derived from critical race theory. So yes, in either direct or indirect, these types of the terminology that's used is critical race theory. And good for these parents that are stepping up, because these school board members and these people who are in government, they need to fear the citizens in a healthy way. The Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so the fear of the parents should hopefully be the beginning of wisdom as well for these folks who are paid by the taxpayers, paid by the parents. And yes, the parents do have a say, have a very strong say as far as what is taught to their children. And the COVID restrictions as well. We have gone over the data related to COVID. There's only been less than 500 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic for children the ages of 0 to 18 years old throughout the entire pandemic. Numbers may have changed since I've last looked at them last week, but again, under 500 out of the 600,000 deaths that have occurred, only 500 have been children. And what does that tell us? Children have a very, very low percentage rate of, if they contract, not if they contract, but when they contract COVID, of dying from COVID. So yes, they should be standing up for their children's rights. Children do not need to wear masks because the mask, they fiddle with the mask. My son, he's in first grade. You should see the things that he does as a boy. He's licking doorknobs. He's licking windows, glass doors. I know my kid's a little strange. I love him to death though. He's great. But that's what kids do. That's what boys do. They spit, they throw sand at each other, they stick each other's faces in the dirt. Like, they're gonna get COVID one way or another, and their percentage rate is super low. So yes, these people need to fear the citizens in a healthy way. I don't think any individual, whether you're in government or you're a citizen, you should fear for your life in the sense of you should be threatened physically, but you should give everyone the opportunity to be able to speak their minds freely. And from a Christian perspective, even though we have the freedom to speak anything we want because we live in America, we also need to hold true to the virtues that we have as well, speaking in love, speaking in truth, and speaking honestly and candidly. And we all need to continue to step up. But I just thought this was interesting. And the other point I'd like to make about this, one last point, Miguel Cardona, education secretary, he says that the aggression exhibited at some board meetings, calling it very dangerous. And they also say it's a form of domestic terrorism, which is the school board representatives. I wonder what their perspective was for Black Lives Matter burning down nearly every single city the summer of 2019. Were those domestic terrorists? Or were they peaceful protests? Largely peaceful. I'd like to constitute these school board meetings as largely peaceful. Largely peaceful. But hey, you have a great day. Appreciate you tuning in. As always, appreciate your support and have a blessed rest of your week. And we will catch up soon. Take care. Bye-bye.